Hello, this is Vincent Han here. This is a part of a series of videos that I'm doing regarding VMware NSX. Today, I'm going to show you some of the demonstration on migrating physical firewall to a VMware NSX distributed firewall. There's going to be 5 portions to this demo. So first, we will show you a user accessing a existing web application. So this will show you that the whole lab environment is working well. Then we will show you what's required to set up or configure when a user wants to add a new application before we migrate the physical firewall to a NSX distributed firewall. So after the migration, we will show you again that the user is the existing web application works well. Lastly, we will show you what's required by deploying an additional web application with the environment with NSX. So let's begin. So what I have in front of the screen here is I'm accessing a console of a ESXi server. Okay, this is a virtual machine. It's going to act like the user desktop, and the user is going to access this web application. So this web application consists of a web server and a database server, and I call this apps the financial apps. So with the loading of this page, it shows that the web call is successful, and the web server will also call the database server using a SQL connection, right? So with the retrieve of the records itself, it shows that the SQL connection is successful. So let's take a look at the network diagram to show how the connections is going through. This desktop as well as the WAN router itself, this is actually consists the remote branch, and you're accessing the data center itself. So this is the WAN network, and then there's a pair of firewall that's protecting the servers. The web server that accessing is this web10-01, and the database server that the web10-01 server is accessing is db10-01 virtual machine. So let's take a look at deploying additional application and what's required in this network. Let's imagine that I am the IT administrator, and the business required me to deploy another application. Let's call it the HR application. So the developer actually set up the virtual machines, and they have passed it to me, and it consists of a web virtual machine and a database virtual machine. Is a multi-tiered application. What I'm going to do is I'm going to deploy these 2 virtual machines. They will be on the same VLANs as the existing financial application that I shown you just now. So we will deploy the virtual machine. So let's deploy the web virtual machine first. Yep. So it's VLAN 97, which is the same as the previous web virtual machine VLAN, right? So there you go. It's deploying right now. So the web virtual machine is done, and let's deploy the database virtual machine. Similar like the web virtual machine, I'm going to deploy this database server on the same VLAN as the previous database server, which is VLAN 98. And yep, so yeah, started deploying. Okay, so let's power on the virtual machines, the web, as well as the database virtual machine. Okay, let's take a look at the console of the virtual machine. Okay, now it has put up, and let's do a ping test to the gateway. Okay, let me log in. Let's take a look at the IP address. Okay, the IP address of this web virtual machine is 10.10.97.12, and let's ping the gateway to show that there's connectivity. Okay, that's the gateway. Okay, so we got ping replies. The application is deployed, and let's do a test from the user desktop. Okay, so this is the user desktop again. Let's access the HR application. This is the URL itself. So let's wait a while. Okay, you can see that the web server has responded, but however, it seems like the web server has issue connecting to the database server. As you can see that it shows that the connection has failed over here. So the reason for that is because the firewall rule for the HR virtual machine has not been added to communicate with the database server. So let's go to the firewall, take a look at the existing SSDs. Alright, so as you can see here, this is the access list that has been configured for the existing financial application. So we'll be adding a similar firewall rule for the HR application as well. Okay. This is the rule that we'll be adding. So the 10.10.97.12 is actually the web virtual machine, and then the 10.10.98.12 is actually the database virtual machine, and it's going to be permitted on TCP port 3306, which is the MySQL port. Okay, let's add it in. So let's go back to the user desktop again and try accessing the application again. So as you can see now that, after the firewall rule has added, the connection to the SQL server, it's successful. The records has been loaded.
From what you have seen, although the deployment of the virtual machines can be very fast and easy, but you still need to wait for the firewall rules to be installed on the physical firewall before the application can be accessed. Before we carry on with the next portion of the video, I would like to show you one more thing.
With this security architecture, VMs in the same VLANs can communicate with each other without going through the firewall itself. So let me show you an example. So let's go back to the HR application web virtual machine, and let's try to make a connection to the financial application web server. So as you can see, it's successfully logged on. So what does this mean, right? So this means that if one of the virtual machine is being compromised, this leave or expose the rest of the VMs in the same VLAN potential of being compromised as well. Okay, let us remove the HR application so that we can reuse it for later part of the demos. So shut down the web virtual machine. As well as the database virtual machine. And we can delete it. Okay, we are done. Alright, so we have completed the first two parts of the demo, and we will be now moving on to the third part of the demo, which is migrating a physical firewall to a VMware NSX distributed firewall. Okay, so what I have here is Cisco ASA 5510 as the physical firewall here. So now it's migration time. But before that, I would like to bring your attention to this VMware NSX Brownfield Design and Deployment Guide. So it's especially useful if you are doing migration. So there are actually three scenarios in this document itself. So the one I refer to for this migration demo that I'm doing is scenario 1 is microsegmentation without overlays. So you can refer to page 6 to 9 of this guide for the detailed migration procedure. So I have actually summarized the migration steps required. It's about 8 steps. Okay, so we will go through step by step as we go along in the demo. So the first step is actually a prerequisite to have a distributed vSwitch for VMware NSX. So in my lab here, I'm using the standard vSwitch. So there's a requirement to migrate the standard vSwitch to the distributed vSwitch. Okay. I also have listed down the migration steps required for the standard switches to distributed switch migrations. Basically, you can do this migration in the vSphere C# client or the vSphere web client. So the difference is if you are using the vSphere web client, some of the steps that you do in the C# client is can be performed using the add and manage host wizard all at one go. In the demo itself, I'll be using the vSphere web client to show you how this migration is being done. So the first two steps of the migration is to first create the distributed switch, then create the distributed port groups. So this is the vSphere web client that we're going to use to perform the migration. Let's go to the networking tab. And the distributed vSwitch. We'll call this the VDS01. We select the latest version, which is 6.0.0. Decrease the uplink. Okay, now we have the distributed vSwitch created. Next is to create the port groups. We will create the port groups for the VM kernel interfaces first. So we have the VLAN 206 for the management VM kernel interface. Let's do it for the vMotion interface. So vMotion will be on VLAN 207. Next will be the IP storage VM kernel interface. This is on VLAN 208. Okay, so the distributed port groups for the VM kernel interfaces required are created. So next we will create the port groups for the virtual machines itself. So we have the VLAN 97 for the web server VMs. So this is on VLAN 97. Okay. So lastly, we create the database server port group. Okay, so these are all the distributed port groups that we have created. Next, we will use the add and manage host wizard to add the host into the distributed vSwitch. At the same time, we will add VM kernel interfaces, and lastly, we will be migrating the VMs from standard vSwitch to distributed vSwitch. So we will migrate the virtual machine networking as well in this task. Okay, so each of the hosts has two uplinks to the standard vSwitch. We will migrate one of the uplink first. Okay. This is migrating of the VM kernel interface. So we will assign to the distributed port group that we have created initially. Okay, then this is migrating the VMs to the distributed port groups. Okay, once you click finish, this task will happen. As you can see, the hosts are being added into the distributed vSwitch. Let's take a look at the virtual machine. The virtual machines are migrated successfully as well. Okay, so let's now move the second uplink to the distributed vSwitch. So we'll use the add and manage host wizard again, but we'll choose the last option over here, the advanced option. And then we'll select the two hosts. Okay, so we're going to just manage the physical adapters. This is the second uplink that we're going to add to the distributed vSwitch. Similarly for the next host. Okay. Let's now take a look at the topology of the host. So as you can see, both the uplinks has been migrated to the distributed vSwitch. Likewise, for the next host, both uplinks has been migrated. Okay, so let's go to the user desktop and do a test. So let's try the financial application again. Okay, it's working well. Okay, so we are done with the migration of standard vSwitch to distributed vSwitch. Okay, so in the next we will be deploying the NSX manager.
So log into the vSphere web client, click on deploy OVF template, choose the NSX OVA file, agree the license agreement, give it a name. I'll call it NSX Manager 01. Choose the data center where you want to deploy. I will leave the storage configuration as default. It's going to be on the management VLAN, which is VLAN 206. Give it a password. Configure the hostname. I'll call it NSX Manager 01. The IP address is 10.206.1.142. Configure the gateway. We'll leave the IPv6 settings. Configure the DNS as well as the domain search name. Give the MTP server, which is the domain controller 01. Okay, once you check and finish. Alright, we have the NSX Manager deployed. Make sure you put on the VLAN, which is on the distributed vSwitch. And then we will power on the virtual machine. Okay, as my lab has limited memory, so the NSX manager has failed to power on. So what I will do is I will reduce the memory from 16 gig to 8 gig. Remember, please do not do this in production environment. Okay, we'll try the power on again. Yup, this time it works. Let's take a look at the console on the booting up process. Okay, it has booted up. Let's log into the NSX Manager web UI. After login, click Manage vCenter Registration and we'll link it to the vCenter. So enter your vCenter information. Accept the certificate, and we are done. So as you can see, we have finished deploying the NSX Manager, and now we are preparing the host for the NSX distributed firewall. So log in to the vSphere web client. You should see a networking and security tab. Under installation, host preparation, we will enable and install for this cluster 01. Once completed, we need to go into the NSX Manager. Under the exclusion list, exclude the DC01 as well as the vCenter virtual machines from the security policy that's going to be applied on the distributed firewall. Next, we'll configure the distributed firewall policies as well as the security groups. Go into the vSphere web UI again. Under the Network and Security tab, click on the Firewall. We'll create the first rule. So we add a section. We call this section external to the Web 10. So after the section, we'll create a rule. Give the rule a name. We'll name it the same, external to Web 10. So the source can be any. As for the destination, we will make use of security groups. Security group is a dynamic group. So we name the security group as Web 10. Then we define the dynamic membership. So we will use the VM name which contains Web 10. Click on Finish as we have no static objects to add. So, and then next we'll define the service. So this is a web traffic we'll type HTTP to search. We completed the first rule. Next, we'll define the policy from the web to DB. Same thing, create a section, then create the rule. The source, we can use back the security group that we have created before, which is the web temp security group. As for destination, likewise, we need to create another new security group. We call it db10. Similarly, we'll use the VM name, which contains db10. We will add the service, which is a MySQL port, which is TCP 3306. Lastly, we'll change the default any rule to block. Next, we'll prepare the transit VLAN and SVI at the layer 3 switch. Let's take a look at the network diagram. So we will need a transit VLAN, which is VLAN 100 in this case. And on the layer 3 switch, we'll create the SVI for the web as well as the DB, which is VLAN 97 and VLAN 98 respectively. I've logged into the layer 3 switch. So firstly, we will add a VLAN 100. Then we will configure the SVI. Okay. Next, we will want to add the VLAN to the trunk between the firewall and the layer 3 switch. So we'll go to the physical diagram, take a look at which are the two ports that's connecting to the firewall. So it's port 17 and 18. Okay, so now VLAN 100 has been added to the trunk. So we'll go to the firewall and we'll configure the sub interface, the new sub interface. We'll name this interface transit, and the security level will change it to 20. Next, we'll do a ping test to the layer 3 switch. Alright, the pings are successful. So we'll go back to the layer 3 switch and we'll configure the VLAN 97 and VLAN 98 SPIs, but then we'll keep them as a shutdown state. We'll also be adding a route to the remote branch and the layer 3 switch as well. So next we will remove the physical firewall rules. At the firewall, there will be two SSDs that will be removing. The firewall rules are added previously, which is from the web to the DB servers. Next step, we will migrate the default gateways from the physical firewall to the layer 3 switch. So at the firewall, we will delete the web and DB sub-interfaces. Next, we will add the route, which is the web subnet, on the firewall. On the layer 3 switch, we can now unshut the SVIs. Lastly, we'll remove the VM VLANs from the trunk between the firewall and the layer 3 switch. So it's on the port 17 and 18. So we will remove the VLAN 97 as well as 98 on these ports. Migration has been completed. So let's go back to the user desktop and try the application. So the application works. So migration has been successful. To check whether the distributed firewall security policy are in place, we will change the web to DB rule from allowed to block. Back to the user desktop. Try the financial application again, and this time around we shouldn't be able to access. Okay, the distributed firewall security policies are really in place. So let's change it back to allowed. And let's test the application again. This time around it's successful again. As part of good housekeeping rules, we will go back and remove the standard V switches from both the hosts. Okay, they have been removed. Similarly, like before the migration, we will deploy the HR application, and this time around in the distributed firewall environment, and see is there any differences. So this is the web VM that we are deploying. Okay, we'll deploy the database VM. Let's power on the virtual machines. Okay, the web VM is putting up. Power on the database VM. Okay, the database VM is put up. So we will go to the user desktop and try again for the HR application, and it's loaded successfully. As you can see, the HR application is being deployed successfully without adding any firewall rules. So how does this happen? This is due to the dynamic membership of the security groupings. Let's take a look at the security groups. For the Web 10 security groups, the new deployed web VM is automatically added. Likewise, for the database VM as well. Take a look at the firewall rules. You can see there's no new added firewall rule. Similarly, like before the migration, we will log in to the newly deployed web VM and do a SSH to the neighboring VM which is in the same subnet. This SSH session will fail due to microsegmentation. So although these two VMs are in the same subnet, they are not able to communicate with each other until a firewall rule is being added. In conclusion, you can see it's pretty straightforward to migrate from physical firewall to the VMware NSX distributed firewall. With this new architecture and the use of microsegmentation, this environment is definitely more secure. Lastly, it simplifies the management of network security in the data center. Thank you for watching and see you next time.